In this video, we'll take a look at the default networking that automatically gets set up when you create a dedicated virtual data center instance. We've already logged into the dashboard and now just need to log into the virtual data center that we created. Let's start on the Gateways tab. You can see that one edge gateway has already been created, and it's in high availability mode by default. Note that we specified 2 IPs when we created this virtual data center, and one has been used and the other is still free. As you can see on the Networks tab, 2 networks get created by default. The one is isolated. It sits on the internal side and gets an internal IP range. Here you can see that one of our public IP addresses has been used to create a routed network. So on the gateway, it takes a public IP address and connects to a private network on the inside that we can connect our virtual machines to. Now if we click on Manage in vCloud Director, we go back to the vCloud Director user interface, where we can manage things at a more granular level. You can see here that there are 2 default networks. One is isolated and one is routed. You can also see that this one is connected to the edge gateway and this one is not. Let's take a look at the services for the isolated network. By default, we can only enable DHCP. In this case, the service has already enabled DHCP and assigned an IP range, default lease, and max lease. Now let's take a look at the default routed network. Notice that we can get all of these additional services simply because we can connect to the internet. On the default routed network, DHCP is not enabled by default. Moving through the tabs, you can see that NAT is not enabled either, but the firewall is enabled and set to deny for all rules. This means that if we connect virtual machines to the default routed network, we have to configure the firewall to allow traffic to get to them. Just setting them up does not enable them to be reached from the outside. Finishing out the tabs, there is no static routing, and obviously there is no VPN or load balancer enabled by default. Moving to the Edge Gateways tab, you can see that the gateway is in multi-interface mode and has used 2 NICs, one on the external network side and one on the organization VDC network side. And again, the gateway is in high availability mode by default. Looking at the properties for the gateway, you can see here too that high availability is enabled. Switching over to the Configure IP Settings tab, notice that the external network has been configured automatically by VMware, and a public IP address is given under the pool we've been assigned. And that's it. This has been a walkthrough of the default network services that are configured automatically for a newly created virtual data center.